With home prices about to set a new all-time high and that housing crash we've been promised nowhere in sight, the US housing market is about to get a whole lot worse before it gets any better. That's according to the latest data from Redfin, the Mortgage Bankers Association, the US Census Bureau, and the National Association of Realtors. Let's take a look. This is the latest median home price print from Redfin showing that 2023, the orange line, has seen home prices climbing since February. We're now at a median home price of $382,861, just 1% below the all-time pricing peak set exactly this time last year. That's alarming that we're about to surpass last year's record pricing and achieve a new all-time high US median home price in the summer of 2023. But what alarms me more is just how normal the price growth in 2023 has been. Let me show you what I mean. This graph compares 2023's price growth in blue to annual price growth for normal years. And by normal years, I specifically mean 2016 through 2019, 4 relatively normal housing market years that preceded the pandemic and all the housing market craziness that followed. As you can see from the collection of gray lines, US home prices usually bottom out in February before climbing 12 to 16% by June, then fall off again in the autumn to end the year between 5 and 10% positive. This is the typical seasonal pricing cycle of US residential real estate. And if we look at 2023, the blue line, we see that 2023 actually looks like a very normal year for pricing. In fact, I take this as a sign that we've entered a new normal for the US housing market. And this is so alarming because aside from pricing, everything about this housing market is completely out of whack. Let's start with demand, as indicated by mortgage applications to purchase a home. The volume of mortgage applications for purchase, not refinance, is the best leading indicator of demand because obviously most home buyers have to apply for a mortgage before buying a home. The latest print from the Mortgage Bankers Association puts the purchase index at 165.6. For comparison, from 2016 to 2019, our last normal years, the index was usually north of 220. In fact, our current level of 165.6 puts us in Great Recession territory. The homebuyer demand right now is lower than it was during the greatest financial crisis since the Great Depression. I mean, just look at this. In October 2009, the unemployment rate was 10%, and the purchase index bottomed out that month at 169.7. And today, we're at 165.6. Let that sink in. So if demand is so historically low, how in the world are we about to hit a new pricing peak? Why are houses getting so expensive again if nobody wants to buy them? And why haven't you clicked the like and subscribe buttons yet? You know you want to. It would mean the world to me, and it's free, and it's easy, and I'll love you for doing it. Houses are getting so expensive again because there are hardly any houses to buy. This graph shows existing home inventory since 2014 in blue, and in red, so you don't miss the obvious here, is the trend line. Yes, the pandemic squeezed inventory further, but you can clearly see that this trend of dwindling inventory precedes the pandemic by years. Whereas inventory levels north of 2 million used to be the summer norm, we're now struggling to keep 1 million homes on the market here in the summer of 2023. So even though the homebuyer pool is anemic, the supply of homes for sale is more anemic. Redfin just reported that homebuyers are still dealing with just 2.5 months of available inventory. That puts us on par with the second half of 2020 and just a quarter month better off than we were in the second half of 2021. And yet pricing growth in 2023 looks like a normal year. Why? Because this dynamic, low demand and even lower inventory, is the new normal. And we've come to this new normal in the US housing market for 2 reasons. Because of the 2 factors that are, in fact, the biggest factors contributing to the health or lack thereof of any housing market: interest rates and demographics. Let me show you. This graph shows in blue the average rate on a 30-year fixed mortgage for the 40 years preceding our recent rate hikes. And in red, again so that nobody misses the obvious, is the trend line. For the 40 years preceding the 2022 rate hikes, mortgage rates generally fell over time. This is important because steadily dropping rates rewarded homeowners for trading up. For the last 40 years, if you'd owned a home for a couple of years, it meant you had built up some equity for the next down payment, and guess what? Rates had dropped. Homeowners were incentivized to trade up every couple of years because every couple of years, their dollars would go a lot further with new lower rates in place. And this cycle of listing every 5 to 7 years kept a good quantity of homes on the market throughout the year and especially every summer. However, if we roll out this graph to today, we can see that we're now in a very different reality. We saw the fastest mortgage rate growth in history in the second half of 2022, and now we have a situation in which homeowners are not incentivized to sell their homes. With the refinance boom in 2021 and 2022, most homeowners are locked into super low rates, and in many cases couldn't even afford to buy an equivalent home if they sold their current home. And with the expectation that rates will probably never drop to their pandemic lows again, we can expect this constricted inventory pipeline to stay in place for years. I hate to say it, but this is the new normal, compounded further by the country's demographics. This graph, from data just released this month from the US Census Bureau, shows the US population by year of age. Baby boomers, who are currently ages 59 to 77, constitute the largest cohort of homeowners. America's 73 million boomers own about 32 million homes. By the way, this other big hump on the graph represents our 72 million millennials who own only 18 million homes. Is that a problem? You better believe it, and we'll be getting into that shortly. The problem with our boomers is that they're staying healthier longer, staying in place in their homes longer, and not exiting the housing market. Trade-up buyers are great for inventory levels because they keep a steady supply of homes on the market, but of course, a trade-up buyer also needs a home to buy, so they also contribute to demand. The golden egg here are home sellers who are actually exiting the housing market because they've died, or are moving in with family, or are moving into assisted living. And the baby boomers just aren't there yet. Yes, the very oldest boomers are on the precipice, though many of them, like my 78-year-old dad born in 1945, is still living with my mom in their 3,000 square foot, 6-bedroom house because they're still in good enough health to do so. It'll be about 10 years before we reach peak housing market exit for the baby boomers. So we're stuck for the next 3 to 5 to maybe 7 years in this low demand, low inventory, new normal of the US housing market. And gang, it's gonna get worse before it gets better. Why? 3 words, 2 of which are hyphenated. Pent up demand. Demand is so low right now, not because nobody wants to buy a house, but because hardly anybody can afford to buy a house. This is Redfin's latest print on the median US mortgage payment. In 2020 and 2021, despite how hot the US housing market got, because the Fed kept rates super low, the median mortgage payment never climbed above $1,750. In 2022, when rates exploded, housing got a lot more expensive, and we ended up in this mortgage payment band between $2,200 and $2,500. And this year, the crisis has worsened, as home prices have continued to climb without mortgage rate relief. Today, we appear to be stuck in a mortgage payment band between $2,500 and $2,650. $2,500 was the ceiling in 2022. It's the floor in 2023. And my fear is that $2,650, our current ceiling, will be the new floor in 2024. So nobody can afford a house, and yet I'm saying prices are going to climb before they begin to fall. How the fuck is that possible? Well, firstly, we've established that the price gains we've seen in 2023 are actually totally normal, totally in line with the seasonal price movements of a normal year for the US housing market. So nobody can afford to buy a house, but also nobody is selling their house, so we've reached a supply and demand equilibrium that actually looks normal and should produce a normal annual price gain moving forward. Absent a black swan event, and even accounting for a mild recession, this is our new normal. But beyond that, my contention, believe it or not, is that if anything happens to this new supply and demand equilibrium, it will be an increase in demand, and hence an increase in pricing. Let me show you how I reason that. There is a lot of pent-up demand for homeownership in America right now. The millennials, currently ages 27 to 42, have finally moved out of their parents' basements and are getting married, starting families, and looking to settle down. The millennials are prime first-time homebuyer age, and first-time homebuyers, as completely new participants in the housing market, fuel demand. But check this out. This graph shows the unprecedented jump we saw last year in the median age of a first-time homebuyer, from 33 years old to 36. This is the oldest first-time homebuyer we've seen since the National Association of Realtors started tracking this metric in 1981. Why did first-time homeowners suddenly age up? Because on average, people make more money as they advance into their careers. A 36-year-old homebuyer, on average, will have more income and more buying power than a 33-year-old buyer. Long story short, younger buyers have been priced out of this market, but that doesn't mean they don't want in. Let me put it another way. A popular argument from the Crash Bros points to the ratio of home prices to incomes. Home prices have recently grown a lot faster than incomes, so that ratio has become unsustainably high. The only outcome, the Crash Bros argue, is that home prices must fall, will inevitably fall, in order for the ratio to return to a sustainable norm. But here's the thing, and as soon as I say it, you'll appreciate how obvious this is. A collapse in home prices would correct this ratio, true, but so would a rapid increase in incomes. If incomes start growing faster than home prices, we'll get back to a sustainable ratio without home prices falling. But is that even remotely possible? Well, Crash Bros like to ignore the fact that wage growth post-pandemic is actually higher than it's been at any point in the last 15 years, but that's beside the point. We don't need to consider wage growth across all American workers. We only need to look at wage growth amongst the very small number of home buyers required to buy up our very tiny inventory of homes. And when we're looking at wage growth amongst this subset of a subset, it's not just annualized overall wage growth we need to consider. We also need to consider wage growth across demographics. For example, how much does the average American's wage grow from age 33 to age 36? In fact, forget about average Americans. Let's look at above average Americans because facts, that's who's buying homes in this market. How much wage growth does a six-figure salary earner see between the ages of 33 and 36? Enough to buy into this expensive as shit housing market? Apparently, the answer is yes. So look, eventually boomers will advance well into their 80s and provide desperately needed inventory relief to the US housing market. But between now and then, we have at least 5 years of a literally uphill demographic battle as more and more millennials try to buy into this market and age up to the point at which they have the income to afford it. And because there is so little inventory in this new normal, because there are so few slots for first-time homebuyers to get into this housing market, we will see the wage growth we need to see to bring the price-to-income ratio back down to a sustainable level. But it won't come from hourly wages increasing across the board. It'll come from the Darwinian nature of our housing market weeding out lower wage buyers. Like I said, the US housing market is going to get worse before it gets better. In this housing market, the truth is worse than the lies. Check out this video for more on that.